Cortical visual impairment, also known as cerebral visual impairment, CVI.
Cortical vision impairment, or CVI, is the most common cause of visual impairment in children in the Western world. Vision Australia defines CVI as a temporary or permanent visual impairment caused by the disturbance of the visual cortex or posterior visual pathways of the brain. The degree of neurological impairment depends upon the time of onset and the location and intensity of the damage. The eyes may function normally, but the visual systems of the brain do not consistently understand or interpret what the eyes see. Causes. CVI is frequently seen in children who are born prematurely and is caused by damage or trauma to the brain rather than injury of the eye itself. Causes may include lack of oxygen to the brain, developmental brain abnormalities, head injury, infections of the central nervous system such as encephalitis or meningitis. Associated disorders found in children with cortical vision impairment. Epilepsy, 65%, cerebral palsy, 38%, non-ambulatory cerebral palsy, 74%, moderate mental retardation, 87%, sensory neural hearing loss, 16%. Characteristics.
There are a number of characteristic behaviours that have been identified as consistently relating to children who have CVI. Children with CVI often are really drawn to things that have highly saturated colour. Red and yellow are the most common colours that people report. They might not look at black and white striped cards often used to assess infant vision, but if you show them something they know, like their own red Elmo, they will look at it. Movement. Children with CVI have a need for movement to elicit or sustain visual attention, and they often begin their visual recovery by paying attention to movement. Their peripheral vision that tells them where things are is usually active first, so drawing their attention to movement or things that are shiny that seem like they are moving can be used to stimulate their recovery. Children with CVI often have a delay response known as latency. This is where you show them something and it takes them a moment to react. You may show it to them and they continue to look straight ahead or don't look, and after some period of moment they turn and look. In the example shown here, the young boy is gazing off to the right as a green plastic ball is held and shaken to his left. After a few moments, the boy's eyes track to the left. He sees the ball and smiles. Visual field differences. Children with CVI have damage to optic radiations which regulate visual fields. A child with CVI will often either turn their head a little bit or only notice things on one side. They often also have difficulty noticing things in their lower field, and so will often use a cane to overcome this difficulty. Visual complexity refers to the difficulty when an object or environment presents a complex display. A person with CVI often can't make sense of things that have lots of patterns, and they can't make sense of things that are against a patterned background, so that objects get lost in the background. Light gazing is the term that refers to the person with CVI's need to really stare at lights and have more lights present. Instead of defensively closing their eyes to bright light, a person with CVI opens their eyes wide and stares right into the light. Distance viewing refers to the characteristic that when you move an object further away, it tends to become part of a background and therefore more complex. So near viewing is often very common with children in CVI. In a person with CVI, the atypical visual reflexes are absent. The reflex to blink in response to an approaching object is impaired. A person with CVI shows difficulty with visual novelty. When given a choice or a range of new objects, they demonstrate a preference for viewing the familiar object rather than taking on anything new. The final characteristic of cortical vision impairment is the absence of a visually guided reach. The ability to look at and touch an object at the same time is not displayed in children with CVI. So combined with the characteristics, the diagnostic criteria for cortical vision impairment is a normal or close to normal eye examination, a medical history which includes neurological problems, and the presence of unique visual behavioural characteristics. It is important to note that there is fluctuation in the visual functioning of the child, and they may be more visually aware on one day but not so the next, and eyes appear normal. The educational implications for teachers of students with cortical vision impairment must ensure that they gain knowledge of and be sensitive to the child's complex visual needs, create routines and activities that can become familiar to the child and designed around their interests, only provide visual stimuli at the child's current level of functioning, build good rapport with the child by being calm and always treating them with respect, and acknowledge that each child with CVI is unique and can learn. Teaching strategies. Each child with cortical vision impairment is unique, and teaching strategies need to suit their individual learning behaviours and characteristics. However, there are a number of common adjustments that will need to be made for children with CVI. They are lighting and glare. Be sure to position students with their back facing windows and use blinds and curtains whenever possible. Colour contrast. Use plain coloured backgrounds to create high levels of contrast between objects and their surroundings. Size. Provide objects and writing that are large enough to be comfortably viewed in all areas of the classroom that are not overcrowded or too visually stimulating. Positioning. Students' head and neck should be supported when they view objects that are placed in the position where the student's vision is most effective and accurate. And movement. Attract visual attention by slightly shaking objects from side to side in the child's most effective line of sight.